All right, strap in, everyone. We're going deep on iPhone open legends today.
Sounds intriguing.
Boy, it is. We've got this conversation between two people, and let me tell you, they go down some rabbit holes with their iPhone theories. It's going to be fun unraveling these.
Well, I think it's fascinating how these urban legends pop up around tech, almost like we give these devices mythical powers, you know?
Oh, totally. And we're kicking things off with a classic, microwaving your iPhone to charge it.
You're kidding, right? People actually believe that.
Oh, yeah, it's out there. Our speakers even joke about iPhones exploding in a shower of sparks if you try that.
It's a little scary how persistent that myth is, especially here in the West. It's like, hello, basic science. Microwaves and lithium-ion batteries, not a good mix.
Right. It's almost like common sense goes out the window when you're talking about technology.
Okay.
But hey, maybe that's why we're here, to separate fact from fiction.
Exactly. Speaking of which, let's move on to another popular one, the rice rescue remedy. You know, dropping your wet iPhone in a bowl of rice.
Like some kind of digital voodoo. Our speakers even talk about how they've used rice to dry out other electronics, so maybe it works on phones too, right?
I get the logic, rice absorbs moisture, sure. But water damage to a phone isn't just about getting it wet. It's about corrosion afterward from the minerals left behind. Rice can't fix that.
True. And those minerals can really mess up those tiny circuits inside. Plus, even waterproof iPhones aren't invincible. One of our speakers even shares a story about their friend who managed to dunk their supposedly waterproof phone. So, yeah, rice isn't a miracle worker.
Nope, not at all. All right, let's switch gears a bit. Ever wonder why the Apple Watch isn't called the iWatch? I mean, everything else Apple is I this or I that.
It's true. Our speakers even joke about a typo on a PowerPoint slide at the Apple Watch launch.
Hilarious. But there's actually a pretty straightforward reason for the name. Someone already owned the iWatch domain.
You're kidding. So Apple, the tech giant, got thwarted by a simple web address.
It happens. But hey, Apple Watch has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?
It does. It does. But this next one is really interesting. Our speakers start talking about the Apple Watch, not just for health monitoring, but maybe even extending our lifespans.
Wow, that's a bold claim.
Right. They even compare the Apple Watch's sensors to those used in traditional Chinese medicine, like taking your pulse. It's a cool cultural connection.
Very cool. But let's be real, even with all the heart rate data and sleep tracking, the Apple Watch isn't a fountain of youth.
Agreed. But hey, it can help us be more mindful of our health, right? Speaking of being mindful, let's tackle a big one. The slowdown conspiracy. The idea that Apple intentionally slows down older iPhones to push people to upgrade.
The classic conspiracy theory. It's like a rite of passage for every iPhone generation.
Right. Our speakers even reference some research from Harvard using Google Trends data that seems to back up the theory. Apparently, searches for iPhone's slow spike right around the time new iPhone models are released.
Interesting. But correlation doesn't equal causation. There could be other reasons for that spike. For example, as we were talking about before, older iPhones might slow down a bit as their batteries age, but that's not some sinister plot by Apple. It's just physics.
Yeah, and our speakers also mentioned that other research debunked the slowdown theory, showing that iPhones don't actually slow down with new iOS updates. So it's not as clear-cut as some people might believe.
Definitely not. I think a lot of it is psychological, too. You get a shiny new phone, and suddenly your old one feels like a dinosaur.
Exactly. It's all relative.
Right.
Okay, last one before we take a break. iPhone data collection and those anxieties around constant surveillance. Our speakers get into it with fingerprint scanning, facial recognition, and feeling like they're always being watched.
Understandable concerns in this day and age. It's natural to wonder how much information our phones are collecting about us, especially with all the cameras and facial recognition tech out there.
One of the speakers even tells this funny story about mentioning cat to their phone and then suddenly seeing cat food ads everywhere. It's like, is my phone always listening? It's a bit creepy.
It is a bit unsettling, isn't it? But we should also keep in mind that Apple is pretty serious about user privacy. They use encryption to protect data, and they've publicly pushed back against government requests for user information.
That's true. They seem to be more privacy conscious than some other tech companies. But yeah, it's still a complex issue. We'll need to dive a little deeper into this after the break.
Definitely. Data privacy and those surveillance concerns are worth exploring further. So, before the break, we were talking about iPhones potentially slowing down and that whole slowdown conspiracy.
Yeah, a lot of people think Apple's purposely making older phones laggy to force upgrades.
Right, but we were also saying it might not be so simple. Like, what about battery degradation? That's got to play a role.
Makes sense. An older battery can't hold as much of a charge, so maybe it affects performance.
Yeah.
Exactly. Think of it like trying to run a marathon on an empty stomach. You just don't have the same energy. And on top of that, Apple's added features to manage battery health, which could cause a bit of slowdown to prevent unexpected shutdowns.
So they're trying to make the phone last longer, even if it means sacrificing a little speed in the process.
Exactly. It's a trade-off. And we also have to factor in just how quickly technology advances. Every year, processors get faster, screens get sharper, software demands more power. So even if your battery's fine, an older iPhone might struggle to keep up with the latest and greatest.
Like trying to play a brand new video game on a computer from 10 years ago, it's just not going to run smoothly.
Perfect analogy. And then there's the psychological factor. We're constantly bombarded with ads for the newest iPhones, so it's easy to start feeling like our current phone is outdated, even if it's working perfectly fine.
It's like the keeping up with the Joneses mentality, but for tech. You always got to have the latest and greatest, or you feel like you're falling behind.
Exactly. Our perception of speed and performance is all relative. What felt blazing fast a few years ago might feel sluggish compared to today's standards. It's an interesting mix of tech, psychology, and marketing.
Speaking of marketing and the ever-evolving tech world, let's get back to that iPhone data collection thing. The folks in our source material were pretty worried about the potential for constant surveillance, with fingerprint scanning, facial recognition, feeling like they're always being watched.
I get it, it's a valid concern, especially these days. With cameras and facial recognition tech popping up everywhere, it's natural to wonder, how much is my phone actually collecting about me?
It's a bit creepy, right? One of the speakers even talked about mentioning cat to their phone and then suddenly seeing cat food ads everywhere. Makes you wonder if your phone is always listening, even when you think it's not.
It's definitely unsettling. But on the flip side, Apple does seem to care about user privacy. They use encryption to protect data, and they've made a big deal out of resisting government requests for user information.
Right, they have a better track record on privacy than some other tech companies.
Yeah.
But it's still complicated. Like, what about all those third-party apps we use? They collect data too, right?
Absolutely. And that's where it gets tricky. It's important to pay attention to the permissions we give apps and be mindful of what information we're sharing. The good news is we do have some control. We can choose to limit tracking, adjust privacy settings, and be selective about the apps we use.
So it's about being proactive and making informed choices about our digital footprint, right?
Exactly. It's a balancing act between convenience and privacy. We love those personalized recommendations and smooth user experiences, but they often come at the cost of sharing data. It's up to each of us to decide where we draw the line.
And that brings us back to the Apple Watch and the whole idea of it monitoring our health, maybe even extending our lives.
Remember that. It was like a digital fountain of youth.
Our speakers were having fun with that one, drawing a parallel between the watch's sensors and traditional Chinese medicine, like taking your pulse.
It is a cool cultural connection, like ancient wisdom meets modern technology.
Right. They even mentioned the golden apple from Greek mythology, the one that granted immortality. Talk about connecting the dots.
It just shows how fascinated we are with longevity. But let's be realistic, the Apple Watch isn't a magical life extender. It's more about giving us tools to take charge of our health.
Exactly. It's about being proactive. And with all the heart rate tracking, sleep monitoring, and even fall detection, it can definitely give us valuable insights we wouldn't have otherwise.
Agreed. So not immortality, but definitely a step towards a more health-conscious lifestyle.
Okay, last but not least, we got to address the iWatch elephant in the room. Why isn't the Apple Watch called the iWatch? Our speakers were even joking about a typo on the launch presentation.
Can you imagine Apple forgetting the I? Talk about a PR nightmare.
Seriously. But apparently, there's a simpler explanation. Somebody already had the iWatch domain name.
Yep, that's the story. Even a tech giant like Apple can't just grab any name they want. It shows how important intellectual property is in the digital world.
Makes you wonder what other iProducts are out there, just waiting for their domain names to become available, like the iToaster or the iFridge.
The possibilities are endless, but hey, Apple Watch does have a certain elegance, don't you think?
It does, it does. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from exploding iPhones to digital fountains of youth. It's been quite a journey through the world of iPhone urban legends.
It really has. And it's fascinating to see how these stories, whether true or not, reflect our anxieties and hopes about technology. They're like modern-day folklore, helping us make sense of this digital world we live in.
Absolutely. So what are some key takeaways you'd like our listeners to remember?
Well, first off, always be skeptical, especially online where misinformation spreads so easily. Double check those wild claims before you hit the share button.
And remember, tech is a tool, not a magic wand. It's powerful, but we need to use it responsibly.
And most importantly, let's approach these conversations with an open mind and a willingness to learn from each other. We can all benefit from sharing our experiences, concerns, and hopes for the future of technology.
Beautifully said. So next time you hear a crazy iPhone rumor, don't just dismiss it. Take a moment to think about what it reveals about our relationship with tech.
Exactly. Stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring the fascinating, ever-changing world of technology. And who knows, maybe we'll debunk some more myths together next time.
That sounds like a plan. Until then, keep diving deep. And don't be afraid to question the digital world around you.
It's funny, Ray, we've spent all this time talking about iPhones, and it strikes me that these urban legends are kind of like modern-day folklore, those stories we pass down through generations.
I see what you mean. It's like instead of explaining natural phenomena, these legends try to explain the mysteries of technology.
Exactly. Like that microwave charging myth we talked about. Our source material even mentions how it seems more prevalent in the West. Makes you wonder why.
That is interesting. Maybe it's a cultural thing. Like in the West, we're always looking for quick fixes, instant gratification. So the idea of zapping your phone with microwaves to charge it, well, fits that narrative, doesn't it?
I think you might be onto something. It's like we believe technology can solve any problem, even if the solution sounds completely bonkers.
But then you have something like the rice rescue remedy, which our speakers suggest might be more of an Asian thing. Rice is a staple food in many Asian cultures, and they've known about its absorbent properties for centuries. So using rice to dry out electronics, it kind of makes sense in that context, right?
No, totally. It shows how our cultural background influences how we view and interact with technology. What seems totally absurd in one culture might be common practice in another.
It's a good reminder that there are so many different perspectives out there. What might seem like a silly myth to us could have a deeper meaning or cultural significance to someone else.
Exactly. It's all about understanding and respecting those different perspectives, especially as technology becomes more and more integrated into our lives.
So we've debunked some myths, explored some anxieties, and even touched on some cultural nuances. As we wrap up this deep dive into iPhone urban legends, what are some key things you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
Well, first and foremost, be skeptical. Don't believe everything you read or hear, especially when it comes to technology. Always do your research, verify your sources, critical thinking and all that jazz.
Couldn't agree more. And as cool as technology is, it's not magic. It has its limitations, and sometimes things just break. No amount of rice or microwaving is going to change that.
Exactly. It's about having realistic expectations. And also about remembering that technology is a tool. It's meant to serve us, not the other way around.
And most importantly, let's be open to different perspectives, have respectful conversations, and learn from each other. After all, we're all navigating this digital world together.
Well said. These urban legends, while sometimes funny or even frustrating, they give us a chance to reflect on our relationship with technology. They show us what we're afraid of, what we desire, what we believe is possible.
So next time you hear some wild claim about your iPhone, don't just brush it off. Take a moment to think about it critically, do some digging, and maybe even have a laugh about it. You never know what you might learn along the way.
Absolutely. And remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand about technology, the more empowered we become as users.
So stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring the amazing, ever-evolving world of tech. And who knows, maybe we'll tackle some more digital myths together in the future.
Sounds like a plan. Until then, keep diving deep and never be afraid to question the digital world around you.